Today we're going to talk about building a slab piece. For your first project with clay, I'm going to have you building a slab lantern. So the first thing you need to do is we need to wedge up our clay. Remember, this is the ram's head wedge where I'm bringing it in and pushing down. All right, I'm not folding my clay into itself, I'm actually just pushing down and I'm pushing it into itself. I want you to wedge it 30 times, okay? Once you get it wedged, we're going to start rolling out our slabs. So, to do this, you need 2 thickness sticks right here, which I have, they're about 1/4 inch thick, and a rolling pin. You're also going to want something to cut it with, whether that's a fettling knife or a needle tool. And you'll also need slip for this assignment. So, once I have it, I'm going to pound it down so it's a little easier to roll out. In Art 1, you worked a little bit with slabs, so a lot of this is a review for you. And I have a pretty big piece here. Because we're going to be making lanterns, we're going to be using more clay and building larger. Now, if you remember from Art 1, your goal is to get your pieces rolled out right the first time. The reason is because the more we roll these out and start over, the drier our clay gets. And when you first get your clay, it's really the right amount, has the right amount of moisture in it to be able to use it. Once I get it to a certain point and rolling it out where it's more manageable, that's when I bring out my thickness sticks. I put them on each side of my clay, and I keep picking this up and flipping it just to make it easier to roll. I put my roller right in the center of my slab, and I roll away from me, just slowly. Okay, once I do that, I'm just gonna pick it up gently and flip it over. And do the same thing, start from the middle, kind of where I left off last time, and roll away from me. And I'm going to keep going here. My piece is getting pretty big, but I want to go until my rollers are rolling securely on both of my thickness sticks. It's kind of like a train on a track. Both sides are hitting those sticks. And my piece is completely flat. All right, now I can take these away. I'm actually going to cut this down a little bit to make it more manageable because I'm going to roll it out even a little bit thinner than this. Right here are our tools that we use. I'm going to use a needle tool and a fettling stick to start here. I'm sorry, a needle tool and a fettling knife. So I'm just going to cut these little edges off that don't really do me much good anyways. I'm going to pick it up one more time to make sure it's easy to roll. Flip it over. And this time I can kind of roll in whatever direction I want. I just want it to be a little bit thinner, but I also want to make sure that it's really even on all parts of it. I don't want it to get thick and then thin and then thick and then thin. So this part I have to be very careful about working slowly and making sure that I'm keeping things really even. Now, if it starts to get kind of hard to roll, which mine is, and I still want to make it just a little bit thinner, I'm actually going to pick it up one more time and flip it one more time, and then go from there. It's just a lot easier to roll if you pick it up. It's not stuck to your table. Remember that all slab building has to be done on a piece of canvas. You can't do it directly on your table because it will stick and you'll never get it off. Okay, I've taken my thickness down about half of the thickness of these sticks, which is where I want it. So now I need to decide what I'm going to do with this slab. I want to try to get, if I can get all my pieces out of this one slab, perfect. If I have to fold it up and restart, that's fine, but I really want to do that the least amount as possible. So I'm never just going to cut my first piece right out of the center. I want to get as close to an edge as I can. Think about You want to conserve as many big chunks as possible. So for my lantern, I'm going to start with a cylinder shape, okay? In Art 1, I probably showed you how to make something like a box shape, which is totally fine as well. If you're doing a pyramid, you might have triangle shapes that are coming up. It's really up to you what you'd like to do. For a cylinder though, I want a long rectangle. First I need to decide how tall I want my cylinder to be. Here's an example of a piece that's made out of slab. Okay, you can see how it's really even all the way around. This is how tall it is. So what I need to think about is the height is going to be the same as whatever I make the thickness, or I'm sorry, the width of my rectangle going down. So if I want my lantern to be the same height as this, if I laid this down on here, I would cut my rectangle straight this way and straight this way. I actually want it to be a bit taller, so I'm going to cut thicker than that, and I'm going to use these as a guide. Now the length I make my rectangle is going to determine the circumference of my lantern, okay? So the longer I make it, the wider the top will be. I'm going to make it to, I think, right here, because then I think that'll give me enough right here for the bottom. So I'm just going to cut straight across right here. And then I'm going to actually cut this bigger than I think I want it, because it's so easy to make it smaller, but it's impossible to make it bigger. And since I think I definitely have enough here for my bottom, it's okay to kind of aim high here. So I'm just going to cut my rectangle. Here it is. All right. Now, I can already tell that I didn't do a very good job of cutting a perfect square. I do have rulers. It's not a bad idea to use them, unlike what I just did. It might save you some heartbreak later. All right, so now what I do is I'm actually going to roll this up and stand it up. So I can stand it up like this and roll it up. I'm going to turn this so you can kind of see. This is where it meets right here. Now, the tricky part is making sure it stays strong enough. So the easiest way to make it strong quickly is to do my scoring and slipping right in here. So I'm going to just score on both sides. Remember, you always score both pieces that you're attaching to one another. Scoring can be kind of annoying and time consuming, but trust me, it is worth it and important. So I'm going to score both sides. And then I'm going to use the slip we have here. It's kind of like my glue, my liquid clay. And then I'm going to bring it together and kind of push it together as best I can. Now notice, because I didn't measure, how these don't line up. That's not good. You should measure. Do as I say, not as I do. All right, because that's going to be really annoying for me here in a second when I try to even it out. Your goal whenever you're attaching two pieces of clay together is to make it look like they were never apart. Like somebody that's looking at this with their eye should not be able to tell that this is where the seam is. All right, so I'm going to give it some support on the inside, like kind of smooth it out like this. It doesn't hurt to also smooth it out. The more you smooth it out on the inside and outside, the stronger the seam will be. All right. I'm also going to get a rib to kind of help with this. Actually, I'm going to use a metal scraper because I can bend it like this, which is helpful for round objects. And I can bring it up like this. All right, that looks a lot better. And you can also come in and work on smoothing out your inside. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is cut my bottom piece, but I want to make sure that my base is the circle that I want it to be. And then all I do is I set it on here when I'm ready. I have to pick it up a few times to make sure that it's actually a circle. I'm going to take my needle tool. And the only reason I'm using a needle tool at this point is because I actually think it's easier to go in a circle with a needle tool than with a fettling knife without damaging the walls of my piece. And I'm going to take this away. And anytime I'm not using my pieces, because this is my clay, and I take care of it, I'm going to wedge them up into a ball and make sure they're sealed up really well. Because if it dries out, then I'm going to be responsible for making sure it is wet again. Okay, so now we have this. I need to attach these two together. So scoring on both pieces. While I'm over here, I'm actually going to cut this and get it as even as I can. It's probably not perfect, but I can always fix that later as well. Alright, flip this over. Now, you could just do the top, the scoring on the top and flip it over, but if you did any measurements not correctly, which we all realize that I did not, there's a chance that your top, the mouth of your piece, is a different size than the bottom. So I'm just going to stick to keeping this the bottom. Alright, so I'm going to put slip all the way around here. And then I'm going to flip this over and put it right back on here. Alright, now same thing. I want to smooth it out so you can't even tell that it was a separate piece. Nobody can see the seam. And I can use my metal scraper here again to kind of fake it. You'll see how my cracks are starting to show in here. They might come back a few times. You have to make sure that you are really sealing them up well so they can withstand like being moved and things like that. All right, now, as it stands right now, this doesn't make a great lantern, does it? It's, first of all, no light would escape it except for at the top. And it's so big and deep that really, if you put a candle in here, not much light would even escape at the top, really. So, the thing about lanterns is that you do need adequate airflow in order to keep the candle going. So we do need some holes for the light to come through and things like that. So some people want to put their holes in before they build it, which is okay, but you have to make sure your clay is strong enough, so in other words, dry enough to make that work and to make it actually happen. So it doesn't collapse when it's missing a lot of the clay. The other thing that people like to do is they like to actually do it afterwards. And in which case you still have to let it dry a little bit. You need it to get leather hard before you do that. Otherwise, if I cut out big sections of this right now, it wouldn't be able to hold up its own weight. So I am going to give it a little bit of time to harden, maybe overnight. I would leave it in a bag with the bag, maybe just open a tiny bit. I always err on the side of like too much protection, so you could even have a bag that is mostly closed but just a tiny bit open, no wet paper towels or anything like that, no extra water, no extra moisture. Alright, and then you can start cutting out your designs. So a cylinder is just one option. Like I said, you can do a pyramid, you can do any sort of like large flat shapes, a box, something. The important thing is that it's large enough to hold a candle and that it lets light out. Okay? And as far as the lid, I think I would probably put a lid on this one. I would build a lid for it. Like it could be like a cone lid or something like that. just something to where I can take it on and off and it still allows the light to come in.